Right, so that was a bit weird because I've never had that happen before. So I'm back again. I can see some of you around. Hi Simone, hi Dominique, hi Vina. This is always the problem with Facebook Lives, is actually getting things sorted out at the beginning, because even though I've done quite a few of these recently just to test things out, it never seems to be straightforward. So I'm coming back. I changed the rotation because it looked like it was sort of sideways on a minute ago. I don't know why, because it looked perfect to me. All right, let's see if this is going to... This is looking a bit better. Right. It looks weird to me on my phone screen, but it looks better on the laptop. I've got to turn the sound off so I can't hear myself. So hello, hello, hello. And it's just weird. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing again. I've put it up on my laptop, and I'm basically seeing if what you can see is what I can see. So if anybody's there, I'm sorry I had to cut you off a minute ago. I hope you've refound me. I'm just going to keep on waffling for a couple of minutes until you do. In fact, I might even go back into the group and just say I've started again, so that you know. And so I'm actually going to lean over my camera. Honestly, if you could see what I'm doing, you'd be laughing your heads off. Oh, try not to knock the camera. I have started again. So you'll be going, what's going on? Where is she? I've lost the video. Okay. So I hate Facebook. All right. Well, I'm going to get it all sort of ready. So I'm really sorry about that, but the view that I've got on my camera is completely different to what is on my laptop, so I've got no idea. I think this is a better orientation. Hopefully you can see this in landscape instead of portrait now, or sort of as if I'm sideways on. Yeah, good morning everybody. Hope you're well. The sun is shining, but if you've got a chance to join me and do a bit of stitching, that's lovely. Who have we got? We've got Lynn. Hello, darling. We had Simone and Dominique and a couple of others on a minute ago, but then I closed down the video, so they're probably wondering what is going on. So I'm not going to start for a couple of minutes because I just want to give people a chance to re-find me. So all I'm doing now is just, I've got my material ready. I've got my twig, and what I've done is I've pinned it over the twig, but I'll go through that with you in a minute. So yeah, it's been all sorts of fun this morning. I seem to have this quite a lot when I actually do a class. It runs smoothly when I'm doing all these little test things. It's all fine. And then all of a sudden, I go to do a class and it all looks so different. Anyway, it's all going to be good now. So, hi Vina, I'm glad you found me again. Is it looking all right, Vina? Is it? Because I think when I started filming before, it looked like it was sideways on. It was ever so weird. And what I can see on my laptop is a lot bigger than I can see on my phone. So that's a bit daft, really. But there you go. That is technology. Don't we love it? So yeah. First of all, what I've done is I'm just waiting for a couple more people to join who I know were watching a minute ago, who might be still searching for this. So I've got my material ready, and I've got my stick, a twig. Now these twigs, I'll have you know, were hand sourced with love from Claremont Gardens National Trust about 2 years ago. My husband and I were out for a walk and I said, oh, look at those lovely twigs. Aren't they gorgeous? I'm going to use those for something. So they're all fallen. I didn't break them off anything. I didn't cause any damage. I think what had happened was they cut down a tree and these were sort of all over the place on the floor already. So yeah, picked them up, chopped them down and thought, I'm going to use those. 2 years later, here we are. Okay, so who else have we got? We've got, let's have a look. Got 3 of you now, so that's good. So I've just got to keep going and just hope that everybody else finds me, really. I know quite a few people weren't going to be able to join the live today because they're working or not around. So some people are going to watch it on the replay, so that's really handy. And a couple of people can't access Facebook, so basically I was going to upload this to a private YouTube so that they could access it through YouTube, so we'll see. Anyway, so I have got 3 of you, and let's have a look. Any more comments? Not sure at the moment. Okay. All right, so Lynn, you couldn't find me, but you pressed on everything with my name on it and got it. Thank you. Oh gosh, I'm just feeling with the others because they were ready to go and then I stopped doing it. Anyway, what can I do? I'm doing my best, girls. I'm doing my best. So the piece of felt that I cut, actually my twig kind of fits it. Right, I've got a couple more of you joined now, so that's good. I'm hoping the people who initially were with me haven't lost the will to live. And let's get started. So I've got my twig, I've got my bit of felt, and the first thing I'm going to do is wrap the felt over. Now I think that this is just long enough to wrap my wire wound. So I'm not going to cut it down, but if your twig, as I say, they're all individually hand-picked, hand-cut. If your twig is a little bit too short, you need to have a little bit sticking out either side for the wire. Just trim this down. Now, you wouldn't believe it, but I did actually use a rotary cutter to cut all these, but I still managed to get them wonky. So if you're going to cut it down, if you have got a rotary cutter and one of those plastic things, rulers, that's really good. If not, just get a ruler. And what you could do is you could use a piece of chalk, or on the back of it you could, if you needed to trim it down, you could just draw a pencil line and that will give you a guide to trim it down. Okay, so hopefully that'll be easy enough to do if you need to do it. So I've got my twig. It's got a bit of a knobbly bit in the middle. So I always like to make life a little bit more difficult for myself. So I'm going to wrap that over. And then what I'm going to do is pin it. You've got to pin it to win it. Okay, so I'm just going to pin that. I lost my phone this morning. I spent half an hour looking for my phone. Oh, I got to do my live without my phone. So I'm just going to pin that down. In fact, what I might do is put a couple of pins in, just so the edges line up. Now, I'm in the group, aren't I? Yes, I'm in Happy Hippocampus. Hey, ha, 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 ha. Okay. And then I'm going to pin the other side. Just sort of roughly lining up the edges. Now, because mine's got a bit of a kink in it, it's going to be slightly wonky there. So I'll turn that over. And this is now the front. And the first thing you're going to do is get your organza. This beautiful organza that I got from John Lewis. Again, about 2 years ago. I thought, oh, love that. And I'm basically going to look at the original sample there. I'm going to chop it a bit longer, either end. So I shall turn this round and probably a couple of centimetres taller. I'm not measuring it, just going for it. And I'm not particularly getting it straight either. And hopefully you'll have enough for a second project. And then I'm just going to pull some threads off. Now what I thought was quite interesting was that these threads were very similar. Some of them were very similar. The ones on the edges that came off, to the holographic threads that I put in your little bags. So if you ever need more holographic threads, then just pull a few fibres off of the edges. I'm going to do the same at the bottom. Just pull a few fibres out. Okay, that's baking a bit of a mess. Then I'm going to pop that down, and I'm going to pop a couple of pins in to hold that in place. And I really, it just about goes over the edges on the sides as well. So I'll pin that in place. Let's put a couple of pins down for that one. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is, the first thread that we're going to use is the turquoise thread. So I've got a pack of threads here. I've got 4 on them, but one of them I didn't use because it didn't look right. So this is the turquoise thread on here, which is the colour that pretty much blends into the colour of the, it matches the felt basically. So look at the felt, look at the colour there, and you'll see that's the one. And I've taken about an arm's length of that. I'm just going to pop a little knot down on the end. And the way I do my knots is I roll the thread over my finger, roll it along and pull it, and then it should knot. I've got actually got hand cream on, so it might not work. There you go, just a little knot on there. And then I'm going to start from the middle of the top, and you want to make sure you're capturing your turnover. So make sure I start in the middle of that bit there, come through. Oh, bless you, Fina. Yeah. Right, and so now I'm going to just do a little running stitch all the way along. And this is pretty quick. This would be pretty quick if didn't have pins in the way. If you had the option of a longer needle, that would probably make it a bit quicker for you. I'm still missing a couple of people. Bless them. I hope they're okay. But hope you girls are doing okay this morning. So literally just working my way along. If you can, try and keep the stitches fairly even and evenly spaced apart. But it's such a bright sparkly project that I think even if they aren't particularly neat and even, it's not going to be really noticed once you've done everything else. And then I'm just working my way down. I can go a little bit quicker now because I haven't got the pins in the way so much. Maybe I can't. Let's just take time. Take your time, enjoy your stitching. Yes, I got the felt and this holographic stuff from John Lewis in Kingston. I was very impressed. It gives it that lovely shimmer, doesn't it? It's Daisy. Already got a knot, look at that. This is a vintage thread, this one. A Silco thread. This is the thread. Lovely colour. 255 blue green. But they still make that. Yeah, top tip, don't put hand cream on before you start sewing. Can't grip the needle. And use a sharp needle as well for this, if you've got one. I didn't want to specify too much about lengths of needles and all that sort of thing, because I didn't want to put anybody off really. Sometimes if you say too much, give too much detail, it can make people think if they haven't got those things they can't do it, and you can. It is just that those are the things that can make things easier. But if you haven't got them, you can still do it. The other thing that I do tend to worry about is if I put enough thread in the packs. But as you can see, all the threads that I've got, I have to hand wind them onto your little cards, and it does take a lot of time. So I don't really want to do more than I think you need. So it's not that I'm tight. It's just the time it takes. There we go. Hope you're getting on right with the threading your needles. I think the last class I suggested that everybody did that before the class, and I didn't do that this time. I should put that on my standard list of things to suggest. The other things that are really helpful are good lighting. I've actually got 2 daylight lamps over my desk this morning. And in the morning the sun doesn't come around the front of the house, so I don't have those issues with the bright light in the front and then shadows and things that I had when I was showing you what was in the kit. That's always interesting. Remember not to pull too tight on these threads as well, because you don't want puckering. And when you come to the end of a row, you just want to make sure that you leave enough space so you can turn. And continue within the boundary of the shape of the felt. And we're nearly there. Take out that pin. Always like it when I can take the pins out. I do have a bit of a tendency to cause myself harm with them unintentionally. Just every now and then just lay your work a bit flat, just so that you can make sure that you've not stretched it. got a magnetic watch, I think. And then carry on all the way around. Now, the two things in the pack that were potentially different for every person were the twig, because obviously all the twigs are different, and in the pack of sequins I mixed I think it's 3 lots of sequins, but the white ones came from a big pack which had beads in as well. Oh, that's far too big. Oh, never mind. And so really I did a scoop for everybody, so there's no way I could sit and pick out you know, X number of beads or X number of certain shaped sequins. It was a random selection really. Now I've come to the top. I'm just going to make sure that I'm capturing the overlap, and I'm going to try and make sure I work in line again. I could probably take that pin out now that I've got that end secured. And once we've done this bit, now that you've got that secured, you could take the twig out, and that just makes it a lot easier. In fact, you could have taken it out anyway because you pinned it. Oh. It's nice to leave little obstacles in, isn't it? Yeah, life's not difficult enough. Now look, mine's completely wonky. That's because my twig was wonky. So what I might do is just pull that out, go back to where I turned the corner, and I need to come along here. So actually at this stitch I will turn, rather than I went a further stitch up and it made it too high. I'll try and come along there. Got to make sure that I'm still capturing, yeah, just capturing the back still. Doesn't matter too much, but it is quite nice to have it level. And one more stitch and then that bit's done for me. How are you getting on? And then to finish off, I'm just going to go through the top layer of felt, do a stitch and catch the loop and go through it, and just go underneath that loop once more and catch the loop again and trim that off. Now when you're cutting your threads, they do say cut at an angle if you're going to be threading, because that apparently makes it easier to thread them because of the fibres of the thread. If you cut them at an angle, it gives you a tapered edge apparently. There you go. Okay, so that's the first stage done. And what you're going to be looking at now is we're going to do these bits underneath now. We've got the spider's web and we've got the sequin. And what I've done is I've cut the sequin down, and you can use your sewing scissors if you cut the thread itself. So if I show you, so it comes on this lovely long roll, and you just decide how high you want it. And I measure the bits that I did. This one's the longest one, and it goes right underneath. And let's have a look. So that's about 9.5, 10 centimetres. So if you wanted to, you could measure them. It's about 10 centimetres actually, it's a pure fluke. You might get a bit of shedding on these, because they're all on a thread. Obviously, as soon as you cut the thread, they become loose. So what you need to do is line them up. So cut them to the size that you want. And I just had them sort of weaving around here. Now you've got your green fibre thread, and to do this I just cut some shapes, and I had it tapered so that it, at one end it had a point. Can you see that? And then just sort of did the same sort of thing on this side. Did 2 or 3 little waves. Ever so easy to cut this stuff. And so I've done a curve here, and then I've come in from the top, narrow, and then going slightly wider. If I get another piece of fabric, you might be able to see it better. So it's got a pointy bit at the top, and then comes down slight curves. And I just again did 2 or 3 of those. You don't want the top too pointy. That's too pointy, because the problem with that is you'll never get your stitch in it. A little bit more shape in that. So I've got 3 little veins of seaweed there. Oh, Beanie, you didn't get any beads in yours? Ah. Yeah. Okay. That's unusual. Let's have a look. I've got another pack here. Did I have any beads? I had about three beads on this one, I think. You don't need the beads. What you could use instead is just these little ones. The little tiny ones are just as good. Really, all you're looking for is a mixture of sizes. That's all. I'll show you when I come to it. So don't worry too much. Doesn't have to be beads at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is stitch those, pin those in place. So I've got the idea of where I want them to go. If you've got enough pins, you could pin them all down. You want a bit of a gap between them because you want to be able to see the fabric in between so that they stand out a little bit. And they're coming down off the edge for me just till I get them in the direction and placement that I want. In fact, that one I might just have coming over a bit more. Because the other thing to do is to bring in your seahorse and just work out where that's going to go. Because you're going to have stuff down here, so you want that. You want your seahorse around about in the middle, and then you want your seaweeds either side, and then you've got all that stuff going across the bottom. Again, don't be too worried about it. You're going to add some fly stitch to bring this up anyway, to sort of make it stand out a bit more. And do keep your seahorse to one side because they're quite delicate. They're only made of paper clay, which we've hand painted. Actually, my daughter Christina, she helped me paint some of these at the weekend. If you didn't want to stitch them, you could actually potentially use a hot glue gun and stick them on, but it would probably melt the organza, so I didn't risk trying that. Okay, so I've got those stitched, those in place. Again with these, maybe just a pin going across them. Because they will move anyway. You can move them as you're stitching. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch these down first because this is quicker. And you're going to use your green thread. This is actually a silk thread. This is another vintage thread. Lovely, it's got a lovely sheen to it. So this is the dark green on your pack. This one. Same thing again, take your thread. And just roll the knot. Or just however you want to do your knot. And we're going to be couching. So I'm going to start from the tallest one. And what I'm actually going to do with the first sequin, I'm going to go through the middle of the sequin. So that means that if you want to, and actually you can just literally, because these are already threaded on, you can go up one, down the next one, up the next one. You don't need to couch. I don't know why I thought I was couching them. And then this way you will completely secure them into position. And it also means if you've got this furry stuff at the top, the excess thread, once you've stitched your sequin down, you can cut this off and not worry about the sequins coming off. And even if you don't capture every single one, as long as you capture the bulk of them, because they're threaded on, that will be fine. Couching would be if I came up at the side and went across. That's a nice way to shape them if you want to do it that way. And you're capturing down the thread in the middle rather than the actual sequins. So that's a nice way of shaping the sequins. I'm going to go down through that one, take out this pin. And I'm going to come back to that one. And just go up and down a few of them. Up one, down the other, following the line of the thread in the middle of the sequins. Good lighting is so important for this, otherwise you can't see the holes. Get all caught up in these. Could actually do this. It might be easier just to do one thing at a time. Just add the webbing later if you're finding the pins are getting in the way. It's all going so easily and now I can't get through the hole. There we are. Any hole. If you can go back or you can go forward, it doesn't matter. Maybe couch another one so that you can put it into place. Up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with, really. And actually, don't forget, quite a lot of this is going to be hidden. So your main purpose at the bottom is just to secure it to the fabric. So you could miss a couple out and just make sure that you capture the bottom ones. Just knocked a shell over. If you want to trim off the tail ends, you can. I didn't. And then I'm going to come up to the next, start working on the next line. If you really struggle to come up through the hole, come up next to it and go down into it. Don't want you worrying about that. So I've come up by it, next to it, and go down into the one above it. That's another easy way of doing it. Come up next to it and go down into one above it. So you're securing every other one. So just do what works for you. Again, we're just going to have a little look at where this is going. And where do I want that to go? You can push your sequins down as well if they're starting to come up. That'll do. So I'm just sort of holding it with my thumb actually. You could put another pin in to hold it in place, but the more pins you've got, the more likely you are to stab yourself. Coming up to the last one now. We're going through the top one, holding that in place. Fiddle about till I find the hole in the middle. Down through the next one. So I know those are secure now. And maybe I'll come down and just do the one underneath again. Now because I've got quite a lot of thread left and I'm lazy, I'm going to just do a little securing stitch at the back, but I'm not going to cut it. I'm not going to cut the thread. I'm just going to carry on, go on over to the other side and do that last piece of sequin thread, which is going to be here. And I'm going to start at the top and figure out where I want it to go as I go along. And definitely go through the middle of the top ones, because that really does secure them, whatever happens to the thread. And then once I've done this one, I'm going to just have a little check and see if anybody is trying to work out where we are while you finish stitching, hopefully. And then we'll come on to do the webbing. I don't know what that material's called. It's like a spider's web material. Do you know what it's called? Let me know. I'll pop a comment on. So on some of them I'm going up one and down through the other, and on others where I can't find the hole easily I just come up as close as I can. Really not worrying about it. I have found that my house is got quite a lot of sequins floating around that have come off the thread. Every time I've cut the thread I've ended up with another loose couple of sequins. And I'm just securing that bottom one as well, through the middle and down. This is my last stitch on that side, as again it's quite high up, but I'm going to have all this netting stuff, so I'm not too worried. Happy with those. So I'm going to do one more securing stitch to finish off that last sequin, and then finish off at the back and have a quick look, see if anybody's asking for help. Managed to get a little loop there. I don't know how I did that, but I'm not going to bother about it. I'm just going to do a knot over it actually. That's too short. Trim that off. And then we're ready for the webbing. And I've just got another piece of fabric here. You could use your second piece of fabric if you wanted to, just to put needles into. If you're threading different needles, which I'm doing obviously because when I'm teaching I don't want to spend an hour threading a needle. And also just trim off. Got a lot of excess thread at the top here. Trim that off, tuck that under, neaten that up a bit, and the other one as well. Although, you know, sort of, it looks a bit seaweedy, so if you like the look, leave it. Right, I'll let you catch up for a minute while I just check any messages. Messaging one of the ladies I know was there to start with and who hasn't reappeared. Sorry, camera roll, I'm leaning over. Okay, so how are you ladies doing? That all makes sense. Right. Let's do the next bit. Okay, so we've got our little strips here cut, and we're now going to start the fly stitch, and we're going to be using the lime green thread, and that is this thread. It's a Gutermann, and again it's a lovely thread. It's nice and shiny, and it is the number is COL 117. You can see that. Beautiful, love that. Do like my greens and blues. So I've got that threaded up. Now I'm just going to show you how to do a fly stitch. Basically, I'm not the thread. I'm sure you all know how to do this anyway. There are lots of videos online on how to do a fly stitch, and also people do them differently. The way that I do it is I start off, because I want the point at the top, I do a stitch down. So that's my starting stitch, it's just a plain straight stitch. And then I'm going to come up halfway, and this will depend on the width of my fabric that I'm trying to hold down. Come up sort of halfway to one side and go across so that it's in line, and then you're coming up at the point where your straight stitch went down, and then when you pull, that straight stitch that you've done across becomes a V, and that's your fly stitch. And that's how you continue. Then you do the next one is your straight stitch, and then you're looking at where you want the wings of the next fly stitch to be. So again, it depends on the width of the material you're stitching down in this project. And also, this is a lovely one to do like Christmas trees and things, if you're doing little mini projects. So across, so that would be a straight stitch across, but we're capturing it by coming up at the point where the vertical stitch went down, and that's your fly stitch. So really pretty, really simple. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to work from the right-hand side of my project across to the left, because that reduces my pin risk. This one I can take out now because that's all stitched down. So, my first straight stitch, I'm actually going to come into the project. Did I put a knot on that? Yes, I did. I'm going to come into this thread here, just inside, and then come down. I'm only going to come down 0.5 centimetre. So this is a little stitch, this first one, up sort of halfway, making sure I'm in the boundaries of the web. And then horizontally across, if you had it up the right way, would be about here to have that level. And then I'm going to come back up at the bottom of that straight stitch. So you want to keep the thread, the working thread, underneath that. And then just be patient with your threads, there's a lot going on the corner here. So just, when you're pulling your threads, just make sure that you do it nice and gently and release the thread from anything it's capturing. See here, it's capturing a bit of the thread at the side. So while the thread's quite long, and then I'm going to go down, this is one straight stitch down. Again, watch out for all these things that your thread might capture. And that's a slightly longer stitch. Then I'm coming up halfway, across at the same distance, and down at the bottom of that straight stitch. If you haven't captured it, go up, capture it, and that makes your V, and then down to the next one. It's a really pretty stitch, this. Oh good, they've got the lawnmower out opposite. Well, it's a sunny day, people have got to do their chores, haven't they? I do apologise for the noise. And try not to get too tangled. So next stitch down. What's happening is I'm pulling up some of the threads at the side. Across, across, and at the bottom of the straight stitch. And as the fabric, this webbing gets a little bit wider, you can make stitches a bit bigger. Come down a little bit further. Across, across, and down. Take out that pin, it's getting in the way. Down. It's quite fast as well, isn't it? Quite a good way of securing this fabric, I think. Across, across, and down to the bottom of the vertical stitch, keeping the thread underneath, down, you can kind of give it a bit of shape as well, depending on where you put your fly stitch. You could sort of do a wavy fly stitch if you wanted to. Add a bit more shape to it. You could add sequins, beads, all sorts here if you wanted to. It's a bit of a shallow straight fly stitch, but I'm not bothered about that. So I'm going to come down a bit further and then go back to the halfway thing again, so I don't lose the depth of my stitches. Because what you don't want is, oh, stuff myself. Don't want is you don't want the stitches to be flat across, really. Don't worry about all these little threads. They'll pull off really easily. Just check every now and then that your material's going to sit okay and it's not too much puckering. I have to keep reminding myself to keep this in view. You get carried away when you're stitching, don't you? You forget. Alright, now I don't need to go right down to the bottom, but I will. It only needs another couple of stitches, isn't it? In fact, I could just make one long stitch down to the bottom because that's the bit that's going to be covered, and then finish that with a fly stitch that just goes down to the same place that my last straight stitch went to, and not do another straight stitch down. So that kind of secures that last V. And because I'm going to start from the top of the next one, I will tie this off with a little securing knot. Again, just a little tiny stitch through the back of the fabric, creating a loop, go through the loop, gently pull, and that's your securing stitch. Okay, so we're starting the same process again. If you're going to fold your fabric over, just make sure you don't end up stitching it together. I'm keeping my hand between the fabrics, the two layers of fabrics. So another knot and start the process again. So come down, nice straight stitch, and side to side, side to side, back to the bottom of the straight stitch with the thread underneath to create your V. Capturing the thread will create the V. And once I've done this one, I shall take the pin out that's there, might pop it a bit lower. Quite handy to have a bit of a guide, I think. Okay, so where was I with that? Straight stitch, V, This middle one is a bit wider, so I can work a bit quicker with this, slightly bigger stitches. Just a little check, all going okay. Thread underneath. And down. Just keep an eye on the tail of your thread, you don't lose the needle. You could actually do all sorts of decorative stitches for this, couldn't you? This was just the one that I felt worked with the seaweedy theme. And I'm just going to pull that around to the right a little bit more. Again, a lot of this will be hidden, but I've got a little bit of a chunk there that I could have cut off, but I'm not bothered. Because there's a bit of overlapping anyway, so I don't think it's particularly noticeable. If you find that happens, just pull the V thread, and because this webbing, it does catch a little bit because it's quite textured. So never panic. Couple of big stitches at the bottom because they won't be seen anyway. And then we're on to the last bit of seaweed after this, aren't we? Which would be quite nice. And then just make sure that's laid nicely, turn it over. Do your little securing stitch. One more. You could add lots more if you wanted to. There's plenty of webbing there, isn't there? Right, now I'm just going to watch what's going on because I've got just got a message from one of the ladies. Her little girl's full of cold, so she's not been able to join, bless her. So right, I'll let you catch up. You doing all right, everybody? Right. And répétez-vous in the top. Straight stitch down. It's a bit of a big straight stitch to start with actually. That the problem with doing that, if you make the stitch too big, you can end up with a bit of puckering. So see how you get on with that one. Seems right. I shall continue. It's got a bit caught up. Spoke too soon. So what happened there? Got a bit of a tangle. I think the top of the fabric got caught, a little pointy bit. So I shall just hold that and gently pull back on the threads. Okay, good. I hope you're getting a clear picture as well. It's always a bit of a worry that things might go a bit blurry when you've got lots of hand movement. Oh, don't worry, Bean, if you're behind. I mean, that's the lovely thing about these live classes is, you know, if it gets to the stage where you feel that you're, you know, it's not, you're not keeping up, you can just put the kettle on and come back and you can just watch it, can't you? Now I'm going to actually rethread my, I've come down too low here, which would make my stitch too flat. So I'm going to take that out at the back. But you mustn't worry about being behind because, as I say, the lovely thing about the lives is you can just carry on up to the point where you feel you're keeping up, and if you start to get behind, you just either just watch or just stitch at your leisure or just watch it on playback. Alright, so I've got to rethread. I could be half an hour doing this. Use the other needle, slightly bigger eye. She says I can't see the eye at all now. This is why I thread my needles up before I start the class. Nope, try this one again. I've got some of the threads through, but enough to pull the whole thing through. I pulled it out. Right, I'm going to trim off that end, and I'm going to find a needle with a bigger eye. There we are. Right. Probably not the best needle, it's a bit chunky for this, but I don't want to keep you waiting too long. And I'm coming up a bit higher. Oh, I can feel the difference in the thicker needle going through the fabric. That'll be fine. Capture the edge. up at the base of the previous stitch. Take that out. Do a little tangle because my thread's too long. Okay, and we're back. Back on track. This is probably why I only did three threads. Doesn't take a lot for me to get bored. But it does look lovely when it's done. You just take the time to do it. It's worth it. My stitching project for the evening as well. It's unthreaded it again. But this one's a bit quicker to thread, hopefully. Pull a bit more through this time so it doesn't come off so easily. Yeah. Thread underneath. Down. I wonder if there's such a thing as shiny blind. Oh, you could get snow blind, can't you? If you're out in the skiing, you've got too much white around you. You can get shiny blind. Maybe that's why I couldn't see to thread my needle. There's too much shine going on here. Do love a bit of sparkle. Nearly there. Just positioning that a little bit more, just moving that across a little bit. And down to the bottom. I'll do one more V just to kind of secure that. And then that's the seaweed done. Boom. Secure that for the back. Just thinking how much embroidery's changed over the last few years, and think about when I learnt, when my nan taught me, it was all so formal. You really had to stick with your certain stitches, and you wanted to make sure the back was as neat as the front, which was pretty much impossible. Now I can't even tie the back off. Alright, once I've done this at the back, I'm going to go back to the front and just trim off the excess bits that were coming down past the organza. Don't need those. So just here, trim those. I'll trim those to the line of the felt, making sure you don't trim off your organza at this stage. That would be a bit sad, wouldn't it? Okay, so the next part is your you've got some blue netting, and this really was just to give it a little bit more depth behind. This is optional. You don't have to use this, but if you do use it, I just tore some off, and probably on here I had it quite low, but it was pretty much all covered, so I'm going to do a bit higher this time. So I'm going to put that there, then I'm going to put a bit of bandage, which is sort of like a cheeseclothy type thing. I think I'll put that a bit lower. So this bit can be quite quick, because what you can do is secure all of this with 2 lots of running stitches down the side. I haven't got any stitches in these bits at all, just running stitches down the side and a few gathering stitches in the middle. If you want to, you can secure it with pins, but what I would do is just wait. This bit, this is the white netting, you want it so that it's big enough to wrap around your shells and your fibres. So what I just did there was just offered it up, made sure it was wide enough, which it is. I've probably got double the amount that I need, so I'm going to just trim that in half. But what you could do is, before you trim it, just to make absolutely sure you've got enough, pop your threads in, pop your shells in, because you're kind of making a little sandwich here, and then you're just wrapping it. So that is literally all that is just a little, you're creating a little fold with all these bits in. So half is plenty. I know that's going to be plenty, so I'm going to trim that in half. The reason I didn't cut all of this down was partly because of the time it takes to cut everything, but also because then you've got, you know, if you decide you don't want to use it all, or you don't want to use an element, you've got it for something else then. So I've got my blue netting, my white bandage, and I'm just sort of making a little composition out of that. And then I've got my shells and my fibres. And these you can move it along, and you can even turn them over within it if you wanted to. So now I'm going to pin this down, because I want to capture all these elements at the side. So it does get a bit quicker from here, I think. So catching the netting, the blue and white netting, and I've got all that captured now. Let's move this other stuff to one side. And this is where you would need your white thread, which I haven't supplied, but pretty much everybody's got white thread, haven't they? And what we'll do is stitch the sides, and then we'll do a couple of little capturing stitches just to secure these where we want them. So this is a really variable part. It won't be the same for anybody. And again, just check, make sure you're happy with everything, how that's going to work. That's looking like it's going to be pretty good as well. So yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to get my white thread and start stitching the sides. Or you could use your, if you've got leftover blue thread, you could use that, but I think white's better. Right, I thought I had a white needle threaded, but I don't, so. Do I? Yes, I do. Here we are. Naughty thread came out. Okay. Not the thread. And start. I'm going to move that up a little bit because it was, and I'm going to come in a little bit with the pin as well because I want the side. I want to be able to get to the side to stitch it. And it's again just a little running stitch just to secure it. And pull my other bits out of the way so I don't keep catching them. And again, it's lots of textures here, so just be patient with your threads as they work through. And you will get bits of the holographic coming out. Don't worry about that because you can trim down any. I mean, they're really just to give you a bit of a different texture along the sort of the sea, what's the seabed. And you can gather it up a bit more if you want to. Give it a bit of shape. So come up. If you've gathered it, just come up through those folds and stitch it down. Now I have got a knot in the back. Sometimes if you catch the loop of them, you can actually take them out. There we are. So you managed to somehow go under this thread here. So I just need to figure out how to, it's like when you do untangle your jewellery, isn't it? I think I need to go there. No, was the wrong way. The right way is that way. Okay, so now I can pull through. There we go. And if I want to pull up this bit and do a couple of folds, again I just come up. Seem to have come through the netting there. So I'm going to have to, oh, that's alright, that wraps it round. Not a problem at all, is it really? Saves me cutting it off. So don't use too long a thread. I'm doing it because I don't want you to have to sit and watch me thread needles all morning. It's not bad. It's an hour and a half into the class, so we're on track. There's quite a lot involved in the class, so that's good. Right, so I've captured that, the sides, I've captured the netting, a few stitches along the side there, so I'm just going to finish that off and go to the other side. And this is actually a beading needle because I thought if I use a beading needle, I can go straight on to do the sequins. beading needles tend to be a little bit fragile, so, and long. That's fine, seems to be working okay. So I've done one side, knock that thread and go to the other side. And just making sure I come up in the material, don't miss it because there's so much here. And don't worry about your shells, we'll organise those in a minute once you've got the sides captured down. And just a couple of, well, a few securing stitches at the side should do it. Pretty random. It's a bit of a big one, so I'm going to come up again, maybe just pull down a bit of that netting so that it covers some of that big stitch. This is where you can have a bit of fun and just organise the things as you like them. To get it a look that you like and stitch it in. So I've got a few stitches at the back here. That should be enough. So I'm just going to do my little finishing off stitch, catching the loop and secure that off. And then we'll do a couple of gathers in the middle which will help us fix in place where we want our seashells to go. And I think I mentioned as well that the seashells obviously will all be different. That one's just come out, so not a problem. Shove him back in. And that does mean that I need to just make sure that I tuck that under. I also want him on top of the threads so that it shows and doesn't just get hidden. So that's the one I'm going to focus on for the moment, this little one here. I've popped a bit of netting underneath him, so I shall get my thread, come up, I sort of gathered that netting and I'm going to create a little pouch. So I'm coming under all of the netting and going back down close to where that stitch came up, and that should pull it all in. See that? It's a big stitch, but if I pull it, that is pulling in the netting here and holding that little seashell in place, and then I come back up again where I started, just at the nose of that shell, and back down again, gathering those bits of fabric underneath. And then I can do it on the other side of it as well. Come up on this side and just do a little stitch there, which I'll pull, and that's holding that in place. That's sort of captured, you can see that's captured that little seashell, and then I'll just do another stitch behind it to secure that up again, down again, and that's just strengthening that little position there. And then I can finish that bit off. Or I could be really lazy and just carry on. But I won't. I'll finish that one off and then move to the next shell. And I'll do the little one on the other side. And just make sure that's still sitting okay and not puckering up the whole project too much. So I think I'll be happy with that. Could turn that round. I quite like it like that. So I'm going to focus on this one next. And I'm going to try and make sure some of this is exposed at the back, some of the cheesecloth. So same sort of thing, coming up, sort of at an angle really. Just making sure I put a knot in it. And then gathering some of this, going in underneath, maybe making sure that this is exposed, and actually going in fairly near where that stitch came up. See that nice big stitch? And I'm gathering that down. But if I let go, it'll just spring back up. So I'm going to come back up at the same point and just reinforce that. And I'll do the same on the other side of it as well. But as you do this, you do have to keep just checking that you're not causing a problem anywhere else. That looks fine to me. I think once I get my seahorse in place and put my sequins around, that's going to be lovely. Lovely. Right, so checking where the netting is. And you could just do a couple of little gathering stitches here. Just to give it that sort of feeling of movement really. It doesn't have to be one big stitch to gather all of it. That's a bit of the bandage that's caught up there. So I'll trim that off in a bit. And again, if you wanted to do another little gathering stitch up here, come up, pull down the bits that you want to gather. And you're sort of wrapping them and squeezing them down. You can do it completely different to this if you wanted to. You could leave out these threads if you didn't like them. I quite like them and I'll trim off the ends. I'll probably trim off some of the bandage as well. And I'll trim off some of this side. But I do like some of it to be left over. But if you don't like it looking quite so messy, you can do it however you want to. That's the joy of this sort of creative embroidery. You adapt it to what you like. Last stitch, and then we're moving on to the beads. Actually, I think we'll stitch down the seahorse first. Okay, so some of you wanted the white seahorse, the plain one, and some of you wanted them painted. I think they both look lovely. When I painted the seahorse, I actually gave them a coat of matte medium and then used Deco Art metallic lustres so they've got a little bit of sheen on them. And I used the colours did I use? I used the sort of cappuccino and champagne underneath, and then the turquoise, and then the green, and then I went all around the edge with the blue, just so that sorry, it's not focusing, is it? So that when it's down, it sort of pops off the page a little bit, off the embroidery a little bit. So if you've got white, use your white thread. If you've got the multicoloured one, I would suggest using the turquoise thread. You could use white if you wanted to, but I use turquoise. I'm going to thread up my needle with this bit of turquoise thread. This is the first thread that we used, which was to secure the organza to the felt. And I need to find a nice needle again. This one's fine, the big one's good. It's not the big one, is it? Yay, success! And I've not really used a very long piece of thread, so we'll see how that goes. Now the other thing that I need to do, I didn't actually do this, and you forgive me, those of you that I think just sent the kits out to. I haven't put the eye in. So, can you see the difference? The one with the little black dot and the one without. So, all I did was add a dot of black. You can use any pen with a fine point, and you just really want to do a little blob of black, that's all. Literally it. See that? Here. It's a little blob of black. I'm struggling a bit with knowing how focused this is, because as I said, my camera view is giving me a different view to what's on the screen. So bear with me, but I think it's all right. Okay, so the first thing I did, I put him roughly where I wanted him. Please be careful with them, they're very delicate, these seahorses. Like they are in real life, they're very fragile. And I started off at the nose, and I just came up underneath and did a little loop over his nose. And then I came up under his chin. And went to the top, between the top two, I'll call them horns. And that's a little loop there. And you'd be surprised how this is a very subtle look. Most people won't notice these. So you could do it there, you could do it over the back there. Just keep reassessing his position. Where is he? Where is he? Who is he? You could do another one over here. And have that just round his gills. That's quite a subtle one, just in there. And then I came down a bit, and I'm looking at natural sort of recesses where I can put a stitch in to capture him or her. But make sure you don't press too hard and end up crushing it. And then here's another one. So I'll come down there, and this is a point where I just wiggle it so that it's in the right place. Stitch down there. You may find there's a bit of paper clay that you stitch through, that's fine. And then I'm coming down to here. And I'm going to do a stitch there. One down here. And just working my way around the little spiral of his tail without being too rough with him. Don't be rough with our little seahorse, do we? And then the last stitch is going to go in the middle. Again, be really gentle. Last stitch there and down to here. And that is Mr. Seahorse or Mrs. Seahorse in position. Okay, so now it's all coming together. Lynn. That's exactly it, isn't it? I'm absolutely amazed that my doorbell hasn't gone. When they started firing up the lawnmower opposite, I thought, oh, here we go. Here we go. I know Martin, hubby's ordered one of these hoovers that you can clean the carpets with. So that's going to be arriving at some point. Hopefully tomorrow, not today, because he's not around. He's sailing. He's teaching what they call a rusty skipper. A couple of days, where he's basically taking out people who haven't been out on their boat for a while and want a bit of a refresher. And he's had lovely weather for it, which is great. Okay, so the last thing to do is the sequins. So we're nearly there, people. We're nearly there. Got a bag of sequins. I am going to empty this out onto the table for my sins. You don't have to if you've got a piece of felt's perfect for putting these onto, really. And I start with the white, the big white sequins. And what I do is I place them. And I just put a few sequins there. Oh, every time it will be different. Every time. So I figured if I started by placing the big ones, then everything else will sort of fit in between. Creamy hands, sticky sequins. Put one underneath his tail. Now, what you could do at this point is, when you've got these to a place where you like where the white ones are, you could take a photograph. I think that looks quite good. But of course the problem is, as soon as I pick this up, it's all going to move. But that's given me a rough idea anyway, where I want them to go. And white thread for this. And obviously the thing with this is that you're going to have a piece of white thread that's going to go through all these sequins, which are quite far apart. So don't keep rethreading. There's just no point. Just come up. I've threaded. I think I've knotted it. I'll find out. Start with this one. I've never tried this before, stitching without picking it up. We shall see if it moves. And it's that one. Could go through it again. Should really do 2 stitches. This is going to be a fast process. Right, let's just pull that, put that down. I'm going to have to pick it up. It's all going to move, but it doesn't matter, does it? Just to give you a rough idea of the spacing. Now what you could do is just do a couple. What I would do is actually just do 2 stitches. I can't take a picture with my phone and remember where I place them because I'm using my phone to record. So I'm not going to worry too much. I'm just going to stick them down. 2 or 3 stitches just to stop them doing this, coming up on the side. So next one I'm going to put around about here. And these are really just to give it a bit of, it's my phone telling me to get up and move. I've been sitting down too long. bit of decorative element really, isn't it? I guess it could represent bubbles, oxygen bubbles in the water. You always get that, don't you? Sometimes how you can tell if there's something alive in between the rocks. And then I think I'll have one up here. Try to sort of offset them against each other. So that they look random, but actually they're not. One up here. I'll do one more and then I'll replace my thread, because otherwise what will start happening is I'll keep unstitching. I'm going to make that one on here. Now, don't stitch up here, because this is where your twig's going to go. If you stitch a sequin right in the middle there, your twig's not going to go through, is it? So go up to the line of stitching, but don't go beyond it. So I'll place my next one here. And this will be my last one, because you can see the thread's getting small enough for me to just end up pulling the needle off it. I've got some of my beads caught up in the netting. And stitch this off, rethread the needle and start again. And I think actually just an ordinary sewing needle will go through the sequins. If you have got any beads in your pack, you might find that they won't. Ordinary needle might not go through. So before you start stitching, just check that the things you want to use, your needle will go through them, but I'm pretty sure that any needle will go through these. So I'm just going to finish that off. A bit more white. And I'll just show you the sequins that I used. The coloured sequins, the white ones and the blue ones were from these packs. The white ones from that pack, the blue ones were from that pack. So hopefully we've got plenty of those. It was the little funny, quirky ones that were more like scoops, random scoops from a big packet. But actually, by the time I'd done scoops for everybody, there was pretty much none left. I tried to give everybody enough. Okay, so back to this now. I want one here. This needle's a bit thicker than the beading needle, so I think it's going to be alright. And then I'm going to come up and do one here. Thread on my sequin. way of doing it, isn't it? And I think one about here. So this time I've come up and just added a sequin. You could get away with one stitch, but it just might flap up a bit. By doing two, you're sort of securing it down a bit against the fabric a bit more. And then I think, don't get too close. But then again, I think it'll look alright. Let's just do it. Big one there. If you didn't like these sequins, or if you run out of these, I'm sure most of you have probably got sequins in your stash somewhere, or beads, or you might just want to do French knots. And there. Just make sure that that your project will lay flat. When you're moving big distances across the back of the fabric, you can occasionally end up pulling it and not realising that you're kind of stretching on here. And I think I might just need one or two more, and then I'll be done with the big white ones, and then we'll do the blue ones. The big blue sequins, which are the ones from the pack I just mentioned to you. So I think we need one down here. And that I think might finish it off. We could do with one up there, but we'll see. I've only got one left, so I'll just use that. Okay, that's a big sequence, white sequence done. Finish that off at the back. We're nearly there. We are very nearly there. Okay, now we're going to add the turquoise ones, which I think they're lovely. You can leave these off if you don't want to add them, but it's a bit of interest. You could use the turquoise thread for this actually, instead of the white. I think that might be better. I've got enough. Because the white shows up quite a lot. Yeah, have I got a turquoise one threaded? I don't think so. Keep that white one because you'll be adding more of these, and then that'll be the last thing to do, apart from wrap the wire. Of course, I did mention that you don't have to use this for a hanging. You could use it for anything. You could stick it on the front of a card. I've got a card here. Go quite nicely on there. I didn't want to use it as a hanging. Right, where were we? Turquoise sequins. Translucent turquoise sequins. I keep thinking I must learn how to do classes on Zoom. Somehow people manage to record them on Zoom and upload them to Facebook, or have them live in Facebook at the same time, but I don't know how they do them. And I really want down here. This, I like this bit because it really just, it finishes off the whole thing, doesn't it, when you're adding these little bits and pieces. And down here. And I'm sure you could go a bit over the top, but not in my mind. Got a little squeak then. And down here. So I'm not even planning these out. I'm just now that I've got the white ones down, it's just sort of filling in really. You can do as many of as few as you like. Could do one down here. And I'm going to limit myself to about another 5 more, I think, of these before we move on to the smaller ones. So I'm actually going to finish off there because I'm going to go across the other side. It's a bit of a waste of thread if I just take a big line of it across like that. So I reckon one here. One, two, yeah, I could do one there, do one here. I'm going to go a bit closer to the top, again not going into the area where the twig will be. One more at the top there. holographic threads seem to multiply. I'm going to do a couple of little white ones down here. So I'm going to come down here, blue one. You don't need to do too many because you've got lots of little white ones to do. And there. And again, if you can't get it through the hole, come up on the outside and go in through the hole. There's always a way around it. And I think one down here, that will be enough. But before I make my final decision, I'll just pop it down, have another little look and just see. Pull that needle off. That's what happens when the thread gets a bit shorter, isn't it? That's why it's much quicker quite often to use another piece of thread rather than try and get that last millimetre used out of your existing thread. Right, I think one down here and then we are done. There's no wrong with this, you just put them where you want them. This is my last stitch and I've still managed to pull this off again. Oh, such a numpty. But I like that, through the needle. Oh. Right, one stitch. Let's see if I can manage to keep the needle on for this last stitch of blue sequin. Yay. Right, through the back, finish off, add a few little ones, and then we'll wrap the wire and we'll be done. And you can go and have your little lunches. If you are worried about all these long threads, you could, every 2 or 3 sequins, you could do a little securing stitch just so that if any of them do break, you're only going to lose a couple of sequins. But I mean, this is not meant to be a project for something that's, you know, hard wearing really. So, but I think it could be if you wanted to use it on the front of a journal or something. You might just want to put a couple of extra stitches or another thread, re-secure it all with a whole new thread. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my white thread and I'm going to do a few of these little random. I'm still only going to use circles, but I'm going to come up and do a few little ones. I'm just going to pick up whatever's closest. And same thing again, a couple of stitches through. I managed to go through the knot there. That takes some doing, that does. Couple of stitches. Come over here. And I haven't got any beads at all in this pack, so I'm just going to use what I've got. Cute little, these are almost like little flowers. One over here at his back. Careful not to pull the thing too tight. Little one will do. These little teensy ones probably need one stitch. I'll do two anyway. It just gives it a little bit of variation. I will do one here as well. I've got a bit of a gap there. And a little diddy one. Some of them as well, if you press them, you can sometimes find there's another couple stuck to it. If they feel quite thick, just check that there's not more than one laid up. They don't, when they're processed, they don't always separate them out very well. Maybe one up here. This might be the hardest part for some of you because it's very random. But it's good to do that. It's good to get out of your comfort zone and just have faith in yourself and know that it's going to look lovely when you're done. I'm sure that is a bead. Is that a bead? Yeah, just that's tiny. Oh my goodness. Just about goes on there. Oh, I can hear a little bead bouncing away somewhere. That is a little teensy one, isn't it? I managed to find the middle of it. I'm quite impressed with that. One up here. That's quite a quick little finishing, really. I mean, where did that go? Doesn't take too long when you're only doing a couple of stitches on them, and they're just sort of all over the place. These are light beads anyway, there's little tiny ones if you've got any of those in your pack. I'm just going to do a couple more because I think the main thing is that you have the idea that you can put them wherever you want to. If you wanted to use up all of them, you could. Or if you only want to do the big ones, that's fine too. Do one here. I think that's giving you the gist of it anyway. Okay, so I'm going to finish off at that for now. And what I'll do is I'll show you a picture later. I'll probably add another 10 even. There's not even as many as that. We'll see. I'll count how many more I add and let you know. I would probably put a few more, maybe there, there, although that will get swallowed up probably. Might need to put a white one there. And that's pretty much done really. I might put another one up in this corner, and then that will be done for the beads. Okay, so once we've done all of the beads, then we want the wire. So as I mentioned, you do need some sort of wire cutters for this. It's what I've used is this is floral wire, but it's actually quite a tough one. So do be careful. If you prefer, you can use gardening gloves. So you could just use your pliers and pull that out. It's thick enough wire not to be cut by that. Well, yours is wrapped anyway, so you don't have to worry. And here you want to rethread. This is where you find out if you've stitched through the opening. And I want enough wire to wrap a couple of times. And then ideally you want a pair of flat nose pliers, jewellery pliers, or as I say, gardening gloves or something, because what you want to do is wrap and think about which direction. I think I have the wire on the front, wrapped it round a couple of times, and then the pliers really were just to sort of press it down. If you haven't got that, if you've got, you probably have a nice hard surface somewhere. Make sure it's hard surface that you won't end up poking a hole in. Then come to the other side, and then you just want to hold that in place and wrap it round a couple more times. Actually, I wanted to go from the front. So front, behind the material, hold that in place and just wrap it round 2 or 3 times. Think about how big you want it. This one's quite a small hanger, this one's a big hanger. That one's enough for me. Then I would chop it off. These pliers are good because they're, when you cut with these, this bit is pretty much flat against what you're working on. So there's not too much sticking out. Be careful when you cut, you want to make sure you're holding the loose end so it doesn't flick up. And if you've got pliers, squish it down. And if you haven't, press it onto something hard so that you just capture that. And also, don't break the twig. Okay, so that's the project done. With your scraps, I think I mentioned in the group before, you should hopefully have a few bits and pieces. If you're not making another project similar, then you should have enough to, to do something like this. You can, oh sorry, banging the camera. You can use up some of your sequins, because some of these big shapes I wouldn't use on this project, but you can if you like the varied shapes. Then please go ahead and use whatever you like. That's what makes it your project really. But on here I've added a couple of beads, but these were left over. So whatever threads and things you've got left over, this is an old scrap of calico that I'd put some crackle paint on, and then if I wanted to I could layer that up onto some other scrap fabrics and put that onto a card. That's quite pretty. Yeah, I don't blame you, Vina. Yeah, absolutely my favourites as well, seahorses and blues. Absolutely love those. So that's it really. Hope that wasn't too complicated. I hope you enjoy it and have a bit of fun with it really. If you wanted to, you could swap the green fibres for more of this. You could just do that on both sides. You know, have a play with it, see what you think, see what works for you, see what you really like the look of. Please be careful with your seahorse because they are quite fragile. But, you know, enjoy it. Just have a bit of fun. That's what this is all about. So I will say thank you ever so much for joining me. I really do appreciate you. I am so grateful to you all for sticking with me and persevering. And I hope you make some lovely projects. I'd love to see them if you do manage to get them finished. Other than that, have a fabulous rest of the day, and drop me any comments if you've got any questions over the next few days when you start doing it. And I'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye bye.